so that the stations, this piece from here to here is horizontal to the view. So station 100 here in the plan should be directly above station 100 in the profile, right? Station 100. So you want this vertical gray line here, this vertical gray line, to be directly below station 100. And the way you do this, and it's all done in paper space, right? Notice I'm not inside any of the views, I'm in paper space. I'm going to draw a vertical line at any station in the horizontal part of the view, right? So at 100 or 120. Then I snap to exactly here with an intersection. So even though I'm in paper space, I can still snap to stuff in model space, right? So I want to draw a line in paper space from this intersection, and I'm going to turn my ortho on and go straight down. So there's where station 100 is. Then I'm going to move the viewport, again, all in paper space, snap to the line for 100, which is right here, station 100, anywhere on this line, so I'm going to use the top endpoint. Okay, again, I'm moving the viewport, but I'm snapping to something in model space. And then I'm going to move it perpendicular to that vertical line. And now station 100 in the profile is directly below station 100 in the plan. And so is everything between here and here. Right? Everything between these two lines, let me delete this. Everything between these two lines in the plan is directly above those station values in the profile. Okay, now that you've lined them up, don't move one without the other horizontally. So if I want to move this over, move them both. I can move one or both up, but don't move it horizontally independent of each other, because now I've matched them. And then what you can do is you can squeeze the frame down for this, right? So get this a little bit closer. Right? Make sure you can see everything. Get this a little bit closer. Right? I'm going to move both of them down and over a little bit, try and center it, and there's my plan profile view. Okay, and then there's a few other things to do, but that's basically how you line it up. It doesn't take long, but if you follow the step-by-step instructions in the PDF that I gave you, it shouldn't take long. Let me go back a few here. So, okay, so that's the UCS, Sumitra, that's how you do that. Are we supposed to do anything with the reconciled layers? No, so leave that alone. I completed the shortcut last week in the layers, and in the layer properties, when I open it today, the shortcut layers from the top are gone. Okay, so Wei, can you turn on your microphone and explain that to me a little bit better? I'm not sure what you mean, your shortcut stuff. Wei, you can unmute yourself. Do you have a microphone? Oh, you don't have a mic. Okay, so let me try and figure this out. I've completed the shortcut. So are you talking about the shortcut here? Are you missing the shortcut here? Under data shortcuts, is that missing? It's all there. I see. Okay, so you're good. Okay, so I can ignore that question. Let me try a few others. Should all the two layers? Warren, you can make them all color 8. We can change that later, but usually existing stuff, we screen it back. We kind of use it as a watermark in the background. But certainly the layers that I put on the assignment should be 8, right? You can make them all color 8, but I didn't list them all there, so. I want you to see the service layers, right? Because they're going to be the sanitary, storm, and water. If you leave them in color, you'll at least be able to see that they're dashed. So the line type will take care of the fact that they're existing as opposed to the color. Because we have solid lines for sand and storm. Let me choose the side of the water main, or does it have to be? Trung, the water main is on the same side of center as the sanitary. Okay, according to the standard. So if we go to here and we look at page one's right, the center line. The storm is on one side. The sanitary is on the other. The rain is on the same side of the center line as sanitary. So the sanitary is always in between storm and water. Okay, is there a specification in the handout for how the water main should curve? Just make it parallel, 1 meter behind the curve. It's technically it's not correct. I'm going to deal with that, Marin. I'm speaking to you. I'm going to deal with that. Just offset to where the water main should be from the gutter line as specified, and just leave it alone. Leave it as a sharp curve. We'll deal with that next semester. Okay. So that's its approximate location. I don't want to do any more with that because what we're going to do with it is really an AutoCAD exercise. And I'm not going to waste your time now. We're trying to concentrate mostly on Civil 3D functions. So just put it behind the back, put it into the boulevard, as an offset of 1 meter, and just leave it there. Don't do anything else. Okay, and then you need to draw the loop in the cul-de-sac correctly based on the standard I gave you, a W7A, I believe. And then at the intersection, just extend it to the existing water main, and that's it. Right. So just draw the center line of the pipe. You don't have to label any of the bends or the T's or the hydrants. Don't leave anything out except the line. Okay. If you want the label for the size, you can. We're going to use a 150, but we'll deal with that kind of stuff next semester. Okay. It really is an AutoCAD exercise, not a Civil 3D exercise. Is there a specification in the handout? Okay, so that was it, Marin. Is there anywhere else to get information on sidewalk? Yeah, there's stuff, I think, written in the document, and it's typically in the roads section. So if you go to roads, Division C, I believe, transportation, there should be something in here on sidewalk. Oh, you can Control F and type in sidewalk. You can actually paving stone for sidewalk, pedestrian sidewalk entrances, sidewalks and walkways. So if you look at the Division C section 1.3, it describes sidewalks are required on at least one side of all local roads and both sides of all collector arterial roads. I asked you to do both sides. Okay. It says at least one side. I want you to draw it on both sides. That's what the assignment. That's what I said last week. Sidewalks may not be required on cul-de-sacs as determined by the commissioner. Ignore the commissioner. Put it on the cul-de-sac, both sides all the way around. Okay. But there is, if you want to read about the standards, it's right here. Okay. Stephen, that answers your question, I hope. Sir, when I try to line up to view, the line I draw won't go outside the plan view, and I go into the profile view. So, Sheldon, I think you're probably not in paper space. So let me talk about that one more time. So if see, this is a lesson in paper space, model space. See this icon? It looks like a triangle. That means I'm in paper space. If I click inside the frame, then you'll see let me just do this. Then you'll see the kind of the stick figure that you see in model space. Let me go to model space. So see in model space, it looks like two lines, but in paper space, it looks like a triangle. Well, if you go into the view, you'll see those stick figures as well. So I'm in paper space, but I'm going into model space through the viewport. Okay. When you're drawing that vertical line, you have to be in paper space. Okay. So the thing you have to remember is even though I'm in paper space, I can still draw a line and snap to something in paper space, even though it's in model space. Sorry, in model space, even though I'm currently in paper space. So that might be what you best. Right? So to draw a vertical line from this intersection, right, outside the frame, I can do that. If I'm in paper space and I draw a line, it'll stop at the frame. You don't want to do that. Okay, so you have to draw the line in paper space, not model space. Okay? It's very clear in the instructions. Okay, so just make sure you read the instructions carefully. Any other questions? my email, I hope, about the work session? Please come to class tomorrow. Tomorrow's new information for sure. Can you please post the rubric for the assignment? I don't post the rubric ahead of time. Okay, that's how I mark it, and I don't want to be specific about exactly what I'm looking for. I'm trying to explain it to you in the handout. Right? So what you need to do is spelled out here in the assignment. Right? So what you have to do, make sure that you do everything that's specified on this document. If you do everything here, then the rubric is already covered. Okay? So I don't post the rubric ahead of time. The rubric is a summary of what you didn't do. How about dimension? You mean dimensioning the drawing? Claire, tell me what dimension. Okay, we don't need dimension in the drawing right now. Just draw everything. Okay, I just want to see the stuff. You don't need to label any dimensions right now. Sumitra, what station number should be aligned? Depend. So when you create the view, I only go to the PDF page. Let me go to the plant profile setup. It depends on which site you got. So when you look at your profile, right? When you look at your profile, once you rotate the view, any station that's on the horizontal part of the road in the view can be used. So any one of these stations can be used. So I can't answer your question. It depends on which street you have, right? So once you create the view, rotate the view, and then whichever part of the center line is horizontal to the view, any station on that horizontal lane. Okay, so, and it might have more than one. I had two on my example. Any one that's on that horizontal piece. The X-reference, when it comes in by default, typically, so if I list mine, you'll see it's on layer, it's on the current layer, boundary. It's probably a stupid layer to put it on. You could leave it on layer 0 and on. You can create a layer and call it, if you want, normally, I'm not going to be too picky with this, but I usually put it on a layer called XREF and then Topo. Put it on that layer there. Okay, I'm not going to be too picky about that. So then you can change the file, change the layer from whatever it was. Boundary was current when I brought it in, so that's probably not a good place for it. Put it on a layer called X-reference Topo. And then you have a couple of options, right? If you don't want to see the topo, you could freeze the layer that it's on. Right? If I don't want to see anything, I can just freeze the layer. Oh, it's current, hang on. I can't freeze the current layer. So if I don't want to see the topo, I can freeze it, right? And the topo disappears, right? If I freeze the layer that the topo is on, it's gone. That's one way. Another way is to unload the XREF. So if I type in XREF, I can actually go to the file and unload it. So now it's still attached, but you can't see it, and then you can reload it anytime you want. So there's two different ways of not seeing the X-reference layers, right? Or you can go to the layer control and pick all the layers and file, right, and freeze them all. So there's three different ways of not seeing anything from the topo. Okay, this one here I don't recommend. You want to see some of it, but if you temporarily don't want to see it, if there's a lot of lines in your face and you don't want to work with them, you could either unload or you can freeze the layer that it's on. In this case, X-reference topo. Okay, but those are temporary controls. When it comes to visibility, like there's a lot of things you can do. You can turn the layer off or on. You can freeze a layer or thaw a layer, right? When we're looking at Civil 3D objects, you can turn the visibility state to true or false. So there's many settings as to whether you see or don't see something. And some functions are better than others when it comes to what you should or shouldn't show. When it comes to layers, this is a good lesson to learn. When it comes to layers, the reason that there are two states, right? There's on and off, and there's freeze thaw. Why are there two? Freeze thaw is a more permanent condition. on-off is a temporary condition. So if nobody's ever explained this to you, right, you want to be able to do two things. First of all, there's certain things you never want to see, right? So in this drawing here, I never want to see the points except the trees, so I'm going to freeze those, okay? But while I'm doing my work, I maybe want to turn some layers off, okay? I don't want to look at the trees right now. I don't want to look at the text or the pipes. I don't need to see this stuff, right? It's in the way. It's too much noise in my screen. I don't want to look at this stuff right now. Okay, that's a little cleaner, and now I can do my work. I just want to look at the edge of pavement in the center line. When I'm done, though, however, I want to see those other things. So before you print, make sure all the layers are on, right? All the layers should be on. If you don't ever want to see something, you can freeze the layer. And that's generally the difference, right? So freeze a layer if you never see it, like the boundary from the top. Oh, I want to see that, freeze it. That way it's never visible, right? So turn that off, freeze it. That way it's never visible. But while I'm doing my work, I'm temporarily turn stuff off. I don't want to see it, right? So a permanent layer state, if you don't want to see it, freeze it. And then it should always be frozen. If there's something that you have to show when you're printing and you don't want to see it right now because it's too much information on the screen, you could turn it off. And then it's not visible. And then before you print, make sure all the layers are on. That way everything that should show is visible, and anything that should never show is already frozen. So that's why there's two layer states. Right? If you never want to see it, freeze it. You don't want to delete it because you might need it for another drawing or another file or for some other function. But if for purpose of printing, freeze something you never want to see. All the layers should be on when you plot, and that's the difference between the two. That most people use those two functions. Okay. So again, if I'm doing work and there's it's just too much information here, right? I need to see all this when I print, but right now it's in my way. The text is in the pipe. I don't want to see this stuff. I don't want to see the water main or the text for it and so on. I just want to see, I don't need the water main. I don't even care about the maintenance holes right now. I'm trying to get the road designed, right? I want to see the edge of asphalt and I want to see the center line. So that when I draw my edge of pavement and so on, I can just concentrate on that stuff. But before I print, go to my layer control, select all, turn everything on, and now I have the view I need for the plot. But there's still a lot of stuff I don't see. Why? Because they're permanently frozen, right? There's a lot of layers here that I actually froze. So that's what the snowflake tells me. So that's how you use these two visibility states. On and off is a temporary thing. When you plot, everything should always be on. Freeze thaw, you freeze the stuff you never want to see. And you keep everything thawed that you do want to see. That way you don't have to manage, if you only had one of these functions, then you have to remember which ones to leave off all the time before you print. Well, just freeze them. Make sure everything is visibly on, right? So this is a permanent visibility state, freeze thaw. This is a temporary visibility state for when you're doing your work. Because sometimes there's just so much on the screen, certain things for that particular task you don't want to see. Okay, and that's one way of managing your visibility states, permanent and temporary. Where are we, sorry? Okay, any other questions? So much to know about AutoCAD, and there's so much to learn about how to use it effectively, and I can't possibly teach that to you in one semester. But I'll try and give you some hints along the way. I'm going to give you the basics. You're not going to get. I'm supposed to be some kind of expert, but you're not going to get to my level, in one course, right? I'm looking at 25 years or more of experience talking, so I'm still learning, believe it or not. For the T layers, along with the, could you be more clear about what you want for the color? So, Carl, when you created those line types and colors in the topo file, when you X-referenced into this file, they would have come in with those colors and line types. Okay, so sanitary should be red, and the storm should be green, and the water main should be cyan, I think, or blue. So whatever color you got when it came in, just leave them. The only ones I want you to change are the ones on the list for the assignment. So if you go to assignment 2, if there's a layer here that requires a different color or line type, then go ahead and change it. right? So I've asked you to make these T-dash layers color 8. If there's a layer that's not listed here, just leave it alone, right? So specifically the pipes for sandstorm and water are going to be whatever color they were when they came in, when you X-referenced the file the first time, whatever settings you had before. Okay? So if I ask you to change something, change it. If I didn't ask you to change anything, just leave it alone. Okay, good question. Okay, and I've said this before, if in the instructions I've asked you to do something, that's something you need to do. I'm going to be marking, I'm going to be looking for that. If I didn't ask you to change anything, don't change it. Because if you change something I didn't ask you to change, I won't know. So if it's causing you problems later, it's going to be hard to find if you don't remember what you did. Okay? So only make changes to the stuff that what is line type? Okay, I'll show you. So if you have a line type, so see my centerline line type, this red dash thing? If I type in LTS, watch what happens to the pattern. So it's set to 10. Watch what happens if I set it to 1. See how small it gets? The pattern, the distribution of the pattern changes. So LTS is set to 5, you'll see the pattern changes, and LTS set to 10, it changes again. So it's the scale factor on the pattern of a line type. It does not affect the continuous line type. Okay? So that's what it does. And the rule of thumb is, if we go back to paper space, if you're plotting, if you're going to plot at 1 to 1, then the rule of thumb is that the line type scale should be 10 times the plotting scale. So if we're plotting at 1 to 1, then the line type scale should be 1 to 10. It doesn't matter, it's a global setting for the file, right? So I could type it in here, watch, LTS, if I say LTS 1, it's too small. If I say 5, it's a little better. If I say 10, it's even better. So the line type scales generally should be 10 times whatever, ignore that, 10 times whatever this is. So if this is 1, multiply by 10. If this is 5, multiply by 10, so 50. If this is half, multiply by 10, use 5. Okay? But because we're always plotting at 1 to 1, a line type scale should just be set to 10. So if it's not already 10, change it. Okay? And that will change. And look at the line type here. Watch, LTS, if I make it 1, now the existing ground almost becomes a continuous line. So you really want to manage this. LTS 5, a little better. LTS 10, a little better, and so on. So it changes the pattern of the line type distribution pattern. That's what it does. The rule of thumb is 10 times the plotting scale. So in this case, 10. 1 times 10. And it doesn't matter whether you do it in paper space or model space. Okay, other questions? Any other questions? Centerline alignments, labels at the end of the roads are all mixed together. Yeah, just leave them alone. Yeah. Are you talking about it here? They're on top of each other? Just leave it alone. Same thing at the beginning. They might be on top of each other. Same thing with this. Wherever these labels end up, just leave them. Okay. One other thing, you don't have to do this, but some people have asked me. Remember in, let me go back to model space. Yes, you need a north arrow. I think it says so on the assignment page. Must have a north arrow. Must have a legend. I talked about the legend last time, but I'll show you again. If you go back to model space, this is all I want in the legend, right? So you should see one of them will be red, sanitary, one of them's going to be green, and one of them's going to be cyan, I think, or blue, one or the other. That's all you need in the legend, and then put a label there, right? Sanitary sewer, storm sewer, water main, and the line type for this should match. This should be an example of whatever you drew in the plan view. It should be representative, and that should appear over here somewhere, right in here. That's your legend, sand, storm, and water. It's a servicing thing. There are other things, but that's all you need for now. Nothing fancier than that. Some people were asking me about this. So you can see the station labels every 20 meters, and then you'll see, this is the BC and this is the EC, but the labels are different. It's PC and PT. What those stand for is point of curvature. So when you get to this station, there's a curve in front of you. When you get to this station, there's a tangent in front of you in the direction of increasing change. If you don't like the labels PC and PT, and you want to see what you learned in highways, BC and EC, you can change those labels, and you have to change them in the drawing set. Okay, so I'm going to show you this. You don't have to do this, but some people like it. They don't like to see these labels that they're not used to. So if you go to Tool Space, under Settings, not Prospector, but Settings, and if you right-click on the file name, edit the drawing settings, you'll see abbreviations, and then in here you can change it. So what you're looking for is curve to tangent. So PT will become BC, right? Curve, tangent, point, and the other one is this one, tangent, curve. This one should be, so this should be the beginning of curve, sorry, and this should be the end of curve. Curve to tangent should be end of curve. Okay, so BC is the beginning of curve, EC is the end of curve. When you say OK, the label should adjust. Gives some people a warm, fuzzy feeling for some reason. It's not necessary. You don't have to do that, but if you want to, that's where you change it. So let me do that again. I'll change it back. So if we go to Tool Space, not Prospector, you go to Settings tab. You right-click on the file name, Drawing Edit, or Edit Drawing Settings. You go to Abbreviations. The tangent to curve is set to PC, point of curvature, by default, and the curve to tangent is set to PT, point of tangency. That's the defaults. Say OK, and then it'll go back, reach in, it'll go back to it. So that's what you see, but if you don't like it, that's how you change it. Okay, that's not necessary for the assignment. I know what these things mean, but that's the defaults. And there are other settings there, right? If you go to here, you can see all the other labels, right? Spiral, point of reverse curvature, point of compound curvature. This is the spiral to tangent, tangent to spiral, spiral to curve, curve to spiral, SPI, and so on. There's so many different things. There are so many settings. I don't use most of them. I kind of accept some of the defaults, but certainly some things I update, right? Like remember the default, I don't know if anybody remembers this. If I change the style, edit label, so if I click on the alignment, right, the actual alignment, not the labels, the alignment, and I right click and I go to the edit alignment labels, this set that's already the default, if I change the label set to the standard set that Civil 3D gives you, this is what it looks like. That's the style that Civil 3D provides, and it looks terrible in my opinion. So I created a new style, and I'm allowing you to use it, I'm asking you to use it, and I'm using a label set, import label set called road. Say OK. It replaces those. Existing, say OK. Right, it replaces those. When I say OK, the font is all the same size. Oh, that's a bad one. You don't need those. The font is all the same size. They're all the same color, layers, and everything. It looks a lot better. Right? So this didn't come with Civil 3D. I created those styles, but I think it looks a lot better. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. When I create my profile view, the vertical axis was very short because there wasn't much of a change. Yeah, that's right. So it depends which topo site combination you had. Right? So it might look different. It is vertically exaggerated though. If you want to check, yours maybe isn't as high as mine, but if you click on your grid, Marin, and you right click and you go to Profile View Style, and you go to the grid, to the graph, it should say 5 times. But yours might not be as high as mine because you don't have as much vertical difference on your existing ground and your location. So it depends on which site topo letter combination you have. Yeah, just leave it. But it should be, if you want to check it, if you're using this style, if you edit the style, under graph, it should see 5 times. Okay, by default, so it should be fine. Right? So yours might only be this big, right? Some of you might have even more, right? Some of yours might be higher than mine. It depends on the range. If you look at the profile view properties, it figures it out for you. If you go to elevations, it's automatic. It looks at the minimum and maximum elevation of your data, the minimum and maximum elevation of that red dashed line, and then it figures out what the maximum and the minimum should be. Yeah, so you're good. So just leave it. So yours is a little bit shorter, or not as tall as mine. Yeah, that's fine. Whatever the data does. It's by default, if you go to the properties, it'll automatically figure it out. Okay? Later, we will change this. I can make this as high as I want. I can go to 170, and it makes my grid higher, but there's nothing to show there. What we will do later, if required, when we go to the properties, we might add to the bottom. We might actually make this lower. I might make this 1 or 2 meters lower. Let me do 3 meters lower. I might add to the bottom because I want to see pipes underground. Okay, but we'll discuss that in assignment 4 or 5. Okay, but don't worry about that for now. Okay, we're just getting ready. Right, we're getting ready to design our road profile. We're getting ready to design our pipes. Okay, we'll get to that. But for now, whatever height it is, that's fine. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so when you try to join lines upon it and it won't allow you to select one of the lines you need to join. It won't allow you to select. It won't allow you to select, Renique, or it won't let you connect. Won't let you connect. Okay, so when you're connecting polylines, when you're connecting polylines, so if I draw a series of lines, right? If I draw, sorry, let me go to, I'm just going to do this on layer 0. So if you draw a line, and 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 so on, right? When you try and connect them, they have to be exactly at the same coordinate. The end of one must be at the beginning of the other. So when I do my polyline edit, PE, and I click on one, it's going to ask me if I want to turn it into a polyline. I say yes. And then I say J for join, and I pick all the polylines I want to join. Okay, so if they don't have the same coordinate, right, and if I'm going to explode this, if they look like they're connected and they're not, if there's a small gap there that you can't see, okay, it's not going to connect. So you have to make sure the geometry is perfect, right? So when you're drawing something, if you didn't use your OSNAP to connect it exactly, or if you didn't use a certain function that makes sure that they're exactly the same, it's not going to connect. Okay, so that's part of the problem. So you may want to double check that. When you're designing the road, right in here, you should use a fillet command. So it should be connected at either end. Here, when you offset, so if I offset, I'm just going to use 3 as an example, just so it's a different spot. If I offset 3 meters, and then I offset 3 meters, and I offset 3 meters, when I go to polyline edit, and I join this to this to this, if it doesn't connect, which in my case it does, if it doesn't connect, then maybe somebody drew this incorrectly. Because if these didn't have the same coordinate, then the offset won't have the same coordinate. If they're not tangent, it won't work. One way to check it is before you actually use the join command, is if you click on each entity, right, turn this one, click on it without any command typed in, right, click on it, click on both, right? So I'm going to click on the line, I'm going to click on the curve. When I go into the grip, if I click and drag, both entities should go together. See how the end point goes together? That means that the end point of each of those two entities is in the same spot. If there's a small gap there that you can't see, right? If it's ever so small, right? Maybe the distance is like in the 10th decimal place. If you click on one and you click on the other, it looks like it's the same spot. When you click onto one and you move it and the other one doesn't go with it, that means the coordinates weren't exactly the same. So that's another kind of test you can perform ahead of time, right? And like I said, the gap there, as long as they're different, even in the 10th decimal place in terms of distance, it won't connect. So you have to be careful. Okay? But that's a test before you start. Click on both. If that's supposed to be the same, when you click and drag the grip, the end of both entities should go together. If only one goes, then there's a problem. Okay? So then you have to look at redrawing. Okay, which there's the profile. You can so the alignment, you can leave it on layer 0. And the profile view, by default, you can leave it on layer 0. That's fine. If it's close, can you just connect them by moving? You can do that, but it's not always a good idea. So for instance, in here, right, let's say I had a bit of a gap here. Right, if I click on one and move it, then you may have upset the bearing of this line, right? So you really don't want to do that. If you use, let's say, a fillet of a radius of 10 meters, right? If I fillet this with this, then that should automatically connect them and be tangent, okay? If the drafting is sloppy, if this is not in the right spot, right? Let's say it's not, it doesn't match, then what I would do is I would note the radius, 10, okay? So I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to fill it with a radius of 10 and redraw that one entity, right? So there's a couple of different ways of doing it. Depending on how small that gap is, right? So it's a judgment call. And what it is you're drawing. If it's something that you're drawing to improve your surface model, maybe it doesn't matter. But if it's something you're drawing that needs to be laid out, if it's an actual thing like a sewer line or whatever, then you might want to be more careful. So it's a judgment call. Depends what it is, if that answers your question. When I'm creating EOP on the cul-de-sac, the points are always close but not exact. On the cul-de-sac. Okay, I don't want to give it away too much, Michael, but the fillet command is something you want to use a little more strategically. Because when you fillet with a radius of 10 or whatever, if I fillet these two, that will guarantee that the ends of the curve and the two lines I started with are at the same location. Okay, so I'm not sure the technique you're using, Michael. But it sounds to me like you're not making good use of the fillet command. So you might want to rethink how you're doing it. Okay, I don't want to give it away. To draw the cul-de-sac edge of pavement and to draw the crescent edge of pavement, the standard tells you what it's supposed to be when you're done. It doesn't explain how to do it. And I'm not going to give that away. I want you guys to try it. Right? Based on what it needs to be. Okay? And that's part of the design process, right? What it needs to be when you're done is the standard. How you create that is up to your interpretation and you kind of figuring out what steps to perform and in what order using your AutoCAD skills. Okay, and that's what you're going to draw on. When you're doing design, you have to interpret the standard, understand what the final thing needs to be, and then figure out, based on your skills, how you're going to draw that. Right? And that's something that nobody teaches you. Okay? I can show you examples, but you have to practice figuring out how to draw that. It's kind of it's a bit of a mystery in terms of the geometry. How are you going to create this thing so that when you're done it looks like this? Okay? In the standards, it doesn't show you the procedure. Right? That's up to you to figure out. That's part of your job. Okay? So for these two instances, the edge of pavement for the crescent, the edge of pavement for the cul-de-sac, do what you think is best. Do the best you can, and I'll mark it. And I don't mean to be hard-nosed about it, but if you don't practice that process yourself, you're never going to develop the confidence you need to do any of this stuff. Okay, so here's two. They're typical things. Once you figure them out, you're going to be able to do it again and again and again. But to figure it out is part of the process that you will learn on your own if you can. Okay, now, if you get it wrong on the assignment, You'll never get it wrong again once I show it to you. Okay? There's a process that I use. It may not be the only way of doing it, but certainly there's a couple of options. Yeah, like if enough people get it right, should be, it should be fine. I will demonstrate at least one of them because they're very similar. Okay? The approach on how you draw them is almost the same in both cases. The geometry is different. I will demonstrate it, yes, okay. But I don't want to give it away ahead of time. This is the challenge to you. How do you think you do it? Right? And if you're feeling a little bit nervous about that, good, because it's a skill you need to develop, right? And the more of these you do over time, once you figure out some of these processes, you can draw on that experience to do other things. Because that's the job, figure it out. When you're done doing whatever you have to do, it should look like this. So the standard is there, but the procedure is not. That's for you to figure out. That's what you're being paid for. The north arrow, a couple of ways to do the north arrow. I'll talk about it a little bit. When you go to Paperspace, once your viewports are ready, if you double click inside the plan, you don't need a north arrow for the profile. Right? You need a north arrow for the plan view. So if you click in here, if you type in UCS and hit enter twice, positive Y is the direction of north. Okay, you might have this as a temporary coordinate system, and notice the difference. I'm going to do this in model space. It's actually easier to see. See the coordinate axes have that little square in the origin? That tells me this is true north. If I type in UCS, and I pick an origin and I pick a direction for positive X and I pick a direction for positive Y, this is a temporary coordinate system. Notice in the origin there's no little box. Okay, so if I type in UCS and hit enter and accept the default world, it brings me back to true north. Okay, so you can change the position of the origin, the direction of positive X, the direction of positive Y. Okay? This is a temporary coordinate system. So notice the difference is this icon has no little square in the origin. UCS, enter, enter. This one has the origin. So this is true north. So if you go into the viewport, this is not true north. Right? There's no little box. So I type in UCS and I hit enter twice. And now the positive X, that's the origin, in the direction of positive X, that's true north. So there's a couple of options for the north arrow. You could put the north arrow in model space and look at it through the viewport, or you can use the function in AutoCAD. If you click on the view, you can choose a north arrow. Okay? Choose any north arrow. Pick one. Okay? Don't get too fancy, right? You don't want somebody distracted by something that's kind of complicated. Keep it simple. It shouldn't be the first thing you see. So pick something simple. I don't know. I'll pick this one. And then put it somewhere. I'm going to put it usually at the top left or the top right of the plan view. I'm going to put it on the left side. And when you're done, it's too small. And the reason it's too small is because it thinks it's in millimeters. You're drawing in meters. So when you click on it, to find it, when you click on it, you can change the scale. You can change the scale, or you can just use the AutoCAD scale command. Scale, pick it, pick a spot nearby, and scale it by 1,000. Make it 1,000 times bigger. It might disappear off the screen. Okay. You might need to make it bigger. And then you can use this grip edit to make it bigger. Okay? But that rotation is tied to that north direction of the viewport. Okay? So if you don't see it, if it comes in small, it's because it was drawn in millimeters. No, the scale the scale for the text takes care of itself. Yeah, you can leave that alone. The height is fine. Okay. So sorry, back to the north arrow. Click on the viewport. Pick one. Nothing fancy. Like this is too distracting in my opinion. Right? And wherever you put it, it's going to be too small. So if you zoom in on it, there's an arrow. This one. This is the scale. So you can make it as big as you want or as small as you want. Right? Not too big, not too small. Again, to me, that's too fancy. That's distracting. I wouldn't use this one. But certainly it's there. Put it in the top right or top left. How big should it be? On paper, if it's distracting, if it's too big, if that's the first thing that catches your eye when you look at the drawing, it's too big. And if you can't find it, then it's too small. Okay, so there's an optimum size, and you're going to have to kind of decide what size the north arrow should be. Certainly this one, this is too big, this is too small, there's kind of a nice medium in between. And that style, that exact look, I think is too distracting. Okay, it starts to look like an art project, not an engineering drawing. So I wouldn't use that style. I would use something much simpler, right? I would use something like this or this. I don't like the round one. You can't kind of see the linear nature of where north is pointing, so I don't like that one too much. I like this one line, so this one or this one. These round ones to me are like nautical. I'm not a fan of them, right? Something like this is okay, north arrow. Even these stars or crosses are good, but once you start getting circular like this, it's hard to see which direction is north on something that's round, right? This is a little too simple. I like something that looks linear, not round. That's my opinion, but I'll leave it up to you. Any north arrow of an appropriate size, and again, it's subjective, right? It can't be too big. If it's the first thing that catches your attention, it's too big. If you can't find it, it's too small. There's somewhere in between where it's a kind of optimum size. Okay? But the simpler it is, the better. Remember, the focus is the engineering design, not the north arrow. So I shouldn't take away from you the focus. Now this is ready to go. 500 is correct, 100 is correct. What you need to do is figure out what this length represents in the plan view of the plan profile. Remember, I'll measure it. The length of this is 40, but the length of this line in the viewport doesn't represent 40. It represents something else. Remember, we did this with the topo, so you have to figure that out. Go to page 167. What is the line beside the edge of pavement? I don't know. Let's take a look. 167. So you're talking about there's a double line there? Oops, hang on. So if I zoom in on this double line, this one on the inside, that's the gutter line, which we call the edge of pavement. This other line is the back of curb. Right? So the radius is for the edge of pavement, which is the gutter position. The other line is the back of curb. So you need to draw both of those, right? Edge of pavement and back of curb. Is it the curb dimension? Yeah, it's the radius for the gutter line, which is the pavement. Remember, I'm using the term pavement, but in Richmond Hill, pavement is the gutter line. So specifically, draw the gutter position, but the language we use, draw the pavement location, which is in this case. It's not always true, though. Some standards will show you this is the gutter line. This one. Okay, local roads and collectors aren't that big a deal. But if you go to like a freeway or an arterial road, the pavement width actually is from edge of asphalt to edge of asphalt. That width of the gutter is not included in the pavement definition. So you really have to pay attention to the standard. Okay, so the term pavement is not always the edge of asphalt, is not always the gutter line. It depends on the standard you're using. In Richmond Hill, it means gutter line. Okay, and I'm not doing that to confuse you, that's just the language that's used, so you have to get used to it. Nobody wants to speak. Your microphones are enabled if you guys want to ask a question without typing. You can unmute yourself if you want.
Hi, sir. Can I speak?
Hello? Yeah, go ahead. Who's this? Who am I talking to?
Sumitra.
Okay.
Yeah, I've inserted my north arrow, but I don't know why it's disappeared. I can't find it.
Okay, so if you go to your paper space, zoom extents, Z, enter, E, enter. Does it do something like this? The north arrow never shows up. The same problem. Okay. it should show up on layer 0 by default. So let me put one in. I'm going to pick a spot. Don't assume 0, right? So pick a spot, click, and it's very, very small. So you need to click on it if you can find it, and then change the scale by stretching it. Okay. If you don't see it, it's because it might be not in the frame. So it might be off here somewhere. So if I zoom extents, if you see that effect, it means it's out here somewhere. That may be the other problem. And the third issue is if it's on layer 0, which it should be by default. Let me check that. Let me just check mine. If I put this on, let me just check. This might be the problem. If I put it on boundary. If my current layer is boundary, and I click on the frame, and I click on the frame, and I want to put in a north arrow. Let me see this. There's my arrow. Frame. Where's my function for north now? I'm trying to recreate the problem. Hang on. View. I click on the frame, and I want to insert the north arrow. Why is the ribbon not working now? Yeah, that's what might happen. So you have to be careful when you place it. Don't just pick anywhere. Make sure you click a spot that you know is nearby. Okay, so in my case, it's way out here. Right? If I zoom extents, if you get this effect, zoom out a little bit, it's probably way out to the side. Right? Wherever the drawing is, it's on the opposite side. So I click on it, and I go to, when would that let me do that? Okay, so if I click on it, will it go on the current layer? Yeah, it'll be on the current layer. So another problem you might be having, Sumitra, is if the current layer is off, so if the current layer is off, right, so the layer I'm drawing on is off, anything I draw on that layer, there's nothing shows up, including the north arrow. So the layer that you're currently on, the current layer has to be on, otherwise you're not going to see anything you draw, including the insertion of the north arrow. You have to scale it up. Okay. Should we also create a layer for the viewport and make it non-plotted? Yes, I typically put the viewport on the layer called viewport. If it's not created, I create it. So viewport is usually what I use. If it's not there, I create it. So the layer I like to use is called viewport. So new viewport. And then I make sure that that layer is no plot. So I turn it off here. So anything I draw on that layer won't show up on paper. So we don't want to see these frames. We put them on the layer called viewport. You'll always see them in the drawing, but when you go to plot, if you do a preview, you won't see the frames because they're on a no plot layer. And that's the look you should have. You don't want to see the frame. Back curve again. I can't seem to find the dimensions for it. Oh, okay. It's not in there. It's in the OPSD 600 070. This document here. I showed that. I think I showed this. Yeah, we got these dimensions from this drawing. So the standards, I believe in here, the standard for curb line is hang on a second. I just want to make sure that I got it right. I'm pretty sure. The standard for road. So if I control F curb, pedestrian sidewalk, curb and gutter, residential curb and gutter. Curb and gutter, see it says division, OPSD division 600. Division 600 and yeah. So that's where I got this standard, division 600. This is a typical one in Richmond Hill. A 3 300 gutter with a 0.2 meter setback from gutter to back of curb. Yeah, so that was in the package, the module 2 zip file. Oh, maybe when I showed it last time. Okay, yeah, but that's included. It's the OPSD 600. There are many other curb standards besides 600.070, but that's the one they use in Richmond Hill. Yeah, so sometimes the source of information is all over, right? You have to go to the standard refers you to a different standard. Sometimes you're trying to do something in one municipality that have a standard, and a different one they don't have a standard. So you have to figure out how to do that. And then over time, as you work in different municipalities, you have a sense for the standards are very similar and have the same type of information, just the details change. So for instance, this semester we're working using the Town of Richmond Hill standards. Next semester we're going to work in the Town of Milton. So we'll have a new set of standards, but we have to look up the same type of stuff, right? What road section am I using? What curb and gutter detail are they using? What's pavement width, and what does that mean? Is it asphalt? Is it edge of pavement? Where do the sewers go based on the cross section, right? So you're looking for the same information to do your work, but the information may be different in the details when you look at a different municipality standard, right? But you need to look at a road section to tell you where the curb and gutter goes, where the sidewalk goes, where the sewers and water main go, and so on, right? So you're not using this standard, but you'll use a similar standard next semester. Okay? So you have to get used to navigating through these documents. Next semester, one of the tasks you have to do is keep track of words you're going to use, right? So as you look stuff up, keep track of which standards you're using as your work. Just kind of almost like a reference sheet of what standard you used, right? So what's the width of pavement in this case? 8.5. How do you know? Because of this standard and standard, right? You have to be able to quote the standard. It's a good record keeping. And then you have a short list of where to look for stuff next time you work in that municipality instead of the whole document. If you go to this document, engineering standards, there are 340 pages, right? For this course, we're only going to look at about 10 or 12 pages. Right? So if you have a quick reference of which pages are relevant that you use all the time, then it's a good document to create for yourself. Any other questions? Are there any other questions? I think most of the questions I've been getting indicates to me that you've been working on the assignment, which is good. Remember, it's due Friday. Submit both your DWG and a PDF plot of your plan profile before Friday at midnight. 11:59 is the deadline. And I'll hope to have it back to you the following week as soon as possible. I'll probably mark it on the weekend. Same type of thing. You'll get an email from me with the details. and then you'll get a similar instruction. If these things are not complete or correct, you can ignore them. If these things have a problem, you need to fix them before you continue, because it's going to have an effect on the next task that you're going to perform. Okay, so I'll get that to you before we get too far into the next assignment, which we will be discussing tomorrow. So if there's no other questions, I'm going to stop there. If anybody has any, oh yeah, go ahead. Michael, you can unmute yourself and talk if you want. Might be faster. You said we need the previous drawing for this one. Yeah, you can't draw the profile of the existing ground without the surface from the first assignment, right? So this surface was created, right? The surface was created in assignment 1. You could submit it if you want, but it shouldn't change really, right? Just make the updates, fix the problems. If you're not sure what those are, let me know. If you didn't get 4 out of 4 on your surface, there's something you need to do, okay? And if you go back to last week's lecture, I talked about what some of the typical problems are, right? Did you forget to add a boundary? Did you forget to add break lines? Did you draw the lines for the water course but forget to add them to the surface? A couple of people made that mistake. Did you forget to add the break lines? Just because they're in the drawing doesn't mean they're associated with the surface. Are your point groups full of points so that you have points for your surface build? Did you get rid of the spikes? Any of those problems? Okay, so if you didn't get 4 out of 4 on the surface on assignment 1, you need to fix that, okay? Because it could have an effect on your next assignment. Specifically in this case here, you can't draw this existing ground profile if you don't have a surface. And if there's a problem with your surface, especially at the intersection, it's going to cause you a problem with your design. Okay. Okay. Will it be a problem if we do not have that? No. What happens is, see right now, if you make a change on that surface and then you open this drawing again, it'll update. Right? That's why we're connected. Remember the shortcut? So that surface is reflected in this file. If you go and update that surface, the next time you open this file, those changes will be present. So if there's an error, if you have a surface for existing ground and there's an error in it, you can still do all of this work, but something here might be showing incorrectly. So you don't have to redo this work. Go back, fix the surface. Next time you open this drawing, those changes will automatically appear. It's dynamically linked. Okay, so, but you should go back and fix it. Like for instance, if you forgot to use the break lines, then the shape of your existing road section in this profile might be affected, and it's going to have an impact on your design for the profile. When I try to plot the PDF, the plot is empty because of the, it shouldn't be. Tron, make sure all your layers are on. Right? So if you go to Paperspace, and if you can see everything here, when you type in plot, say no, don't worry about that. Preview it, you should see everything. If you don't see stuff, right, if you zoom extents, if you have some line out here, right, and you go to plot, and you say preview, because this says extents, it's going to look like this, right? It's a problem. So if you have like what I call space junk, if there's something out here outside the frame of the drawing, you could end up with that effect. So I want you to erase anything that's out here. If you zoom extents and it fills the window, when you go to plot, it should fill the sheet, okay? But if in Paperspace, if you have space junk, like you said, maybe somebody has a north arrow way out here, and if there's a north arrow out here, it's on a frozen layer, it's hard to find, right? So what it's going to do is it's going to zoom extents, and then the scale will show you what's here, which is nothing, right? So let me do this again. Plot, say no, preview, nothing there. If that's the problem, it's because you got what I call space junk. There's something out here outside this area. So if you zoom extents and you see this effect, it could be on either side, right? You might have junk out here somewhere. Zoom extents. If you see that effect, if you're not zooming extents and seeing this entire window, then you're going to have that problem. Right? So zoom extents, and if there's what I call like space junk out here, delete it. Zoom in. If you see everything, then it should be fine. So what does external reference mean? When I attached the topo file, I couldn't see some lines because of the external reference. So external reference, or XREF, is the process of connecting one file, in this case the topo, into the current file. So it's like inserting a block, but you can't explode it, right? So that's what an X reference is. So in my case, if I type in xref, I've X referenced or externally referenced the topo file. Okay, so that's what the X reference is. I couldn't see some lines because of the external reference. When you do the X reference function, whatever state these layers are in, so for instance, if there are layers frozen or off in the topo file, at the time that you reference it to this file, you're going to see those layer states. Right? So for instance, in the topo file, if all of these layers were off in the topo file, then they'll be off when you bring them into this drawing. Right? So if these were off, let me look at my T-dash there. If you, in the topo drawing, before you save it, turn everything off or freeze it, right? Freeze stuff. When you X reference it, it's going to use those layer states, right? So if you don't see it, it's because those layers were either off or frozen in that other file at the time that you X referenced. See, does that help? I mean, I could not pick lines. Could see but couldn't pick? No, and you won't be able to. There, you should. Let me undo a few steps. Okay, so when you click on it, it should select the whole thing, right? The entire topo file. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, you can't explode it. It's like a block you can't explode. You want to see that stuff, but if you want to make changes to them, like erase or explode or trim a line, you have to do it in the original file. And then the next time you open up this drawing, you'll see those changes. So if you need to change something in the topo line work, right? Like if you want to delete the center lines, you can't do it here. You have to open up the topo file. Delete it there when you open and save it, and then open this one, and then it'll disappear. Right? So this is like a block you can't explode. If you want to make changes to it, you have to open that file. Here we're just looking at it. Any other questions? Okay, so remember my office hours is one period before the start of our class. So today, before class, I had one period open, and I had about 3 students meet me. Those are private, one-on-one video conference calls that we have, so that we can share screen and talk. If you're going to do that, we had an issue with one student. Make sure that your audio and video is good to go. You need a microphone, you need a camera. Yeah, I don't need to see you, but you have to be able to share your screen. Might be faster. In this course, in my experience, it's faster to ask a question verbally. It's faster to deal with me live to help solve a problem than to try and document a problem with email and then me to offer a solution using emails. Because what happens is you have to type up a few paragraphs or a few sentences, do a screen capture to show me what you're talking about. It's a lot of work to prepare a question, highlighting what the problem is. And then it's a lot of work for me to describe what I think you need to do to fix the problem using email, again, with typing in instructions and showing you screen captures. It's faster to do it live, where you can show me your screen and I can talk you through something, or I can show you my screen and demonstrate something. So I'm not going to discourage you from emailing me. If it's a quick thing that I can do, I will, but the best time, the best place is before class on Tuesday and Wednesday, the one period before. Email me that you want to meet, and I'll set up a time. I'll send you a link to a Teams meeting where we can have a one-on-one dialogue and quickly come up with a solution. I usually budget about 10 or 15 minutes per student if I do that, so I can usually help 3-4 students before class. If that time doesn't work for you, let me know, and we could meet at a different time. I could find a different time when I'm available and you're outside of class as well. Okay? So that's the best way to deal with the kind of problems we might encounter in this course, right? Actual live discussion. And if you want to do it in class, I will give opportunity like I did today. It's kind of an open forum. But if you don't want to ask a question in front of the whole group, then your alternative is to ask me for a private meeting, and I'll set that up for you. Okay. But in this context, if it's a question you have, then it might be a question somebody else has. So I'll encourage you to ask a question in class like this, because it might be beneficial to other students. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. We could have a private meeting. Okay, I'll leave it up to you. But if you don't mind, I'd like you to share your issue with other students because they may be having the same problem. Again, you don't need to do that if you don't want to. All right, so if there's nothing else, I'm going to sign off. That'll be it for today, and I'll see you tomorrow. Please come to class tomorrow, and if you're talking to anybody who's not here, it looks like I've only got about half the group attending. Let them know that tomorrow is going to be an important day. I'm going to start teaching again. Okay? So I'm going to stop recording, and I'll see you tomorrow.